Hello, and welcome back to another video. This is going to be the first in a three-part series where I review the latter movies of the Psycho franchise. I recently picked up Arrow Video's 4K box set of Psycho 1 to 4. Since I've only ever seen the original by Alfred Hitchcock, I thought it would be a great idea to go through 2, 3, and 4 and give my honest opinions on them from a fresh perspective. I've decided not to include the original Psycho in this series, as I think everything that can be said about Hitchcock's masterpiece has already been said in general, whereas I really want to give a spotlight to the lesser known movies on this channel mainly. Obviously I will be covering like all sorts of stuff, but I really want to get right into the lesser known stuff and just give a spotlight to things that not many people talk about. But to kick start things off, I will say that I absolutely love the original Psycho, and I think even 60 years on, it is fantastic. Still has immense value as a thriller, even if you watch it with fresh eyes in the modern day. With all that being said, let's talk Psycho 2. So, Psycho 2 came out in 1983. It was directed by Richard Franklin, and unlike the original, it's a full colour production instead of a black and white one. And the star of the original, Anthony Perkins, is back 22 years later to reprise his role as Norman Bates, and he continues his fine form as the troubled man running the motel. Now, what is the general plot of Psycho 2? I mean, there's a lot of things going on in this movie. I mean, at the beginning, we learn that Norman has been in an asylum for 22 years, and the court deems him clinically sane against the wishes of Lila Loomis and the 700 people who she says have signed her petition. Norman is freed and released back into society, moving back to his house and hotel where the events of the original movie took place. There's a man called Warren Toomey who's now managing the hotel. He's employed by the hospital or something like that, and he's basically turned it into a drug den. Struggling to deal with the events of the original movie and coming to terms with being back home, Norman is haunted by the memory of his mother, and that is a recurring theme throughout the movie. As the movie progresses, he meets a young girl working at the local diner, and he takes a liking to her, trying to give her a place to stay, all the while he's trying to get the business back up and running. But obviously before long, we get our first kill when Toomey is knifed by a killer who looks suspiciously like Mother at the hotel, and from that point on, the body count does continue to rise, which is obviously very different than what Hitchcock tried with the original one in the 60s. I would say that is probably a sign of the times, as in 1983, the slasher era of horror was absolutely in full swing. Towards the end of the movie, we get a lot of melodrama, and it's revealed that Mary, the girl who that Norman met at the diner, who's been trying to help throughout the movie, is actually the daughter of Lila Loomis, who is actually the Lila Crane, the sister of Marion Crane, who Norman killed in the original. Her and Lila have apparently been working together through the entire movie to break Norman's psychosis and get him put back into the asylum. However, what Lila didn't plan on is that Mary took a liking to Norman and has decided she didn't want any part of her plan to torment Norman anymore. Norman's psychosis obviously does end up taking a bit of a battering, leaving him to feel like his mother is still alive and being involved in the events that have been going on throughout the entire film. Mary tries to dress up as Norma Bates to get Norman to calm down and fall back in line, but it doesn't really work, leading to a confrontation between Norman, his lawyer who's trying to convince Norman that the Loomis family are the ones responsible for everything that's been going on with him, and Mary, ending up with Mary being shot by the police, believing she was responsible for everything, including the discovery of her own mother's dead body. Now, while we process everything that goes on in the movie up until this point, we get the final reveal at the end of the movie that Norman's mother is actually alive, and Norma Bates was actually her sister who raised Norman as her own child. So Norman's actual mother is revealed by herself to be behind all of the killings in the movie, because she's been trying to defend her boy from anyone who's been trying to harm him. Norman shows, though, that he's still the titular psycho, because he's standing behind her. She thinks it's all happy days, drinking a cup of tea, and he decides to smash her over the head with a shovel. Obviously, at that point, she's pretty much dead, and he carries her body up to the mother's room and puts her body in the chair where Norma was in the original movie. So her now dead body takes the place of Norma's skeleton from the first movie, and he begins to talk to Mother as if she was still alive, basically restarting the cycle all over again from the first movie. And yeah, that's how the movie ends. And I guess, in a way, how do I feel personally about this movie? Well, it's got a charm to it, and I do enjoy the idea that by not being able to forgive Norman and move on, the Loomis family sort of brings about its own demise through a bit of karma, with Norman's real mother coming after him in self-defense of Norman. However, where I think the movie fails the most is that a lot of the movie's runtime is spent trying to make Norman come across like a regular guy who's trying to, he's normal, he's conquered his demons, and people are just fucking with him throughout the entire movie. However, obviously then he switches back into his psychosis, and it happens very rapidly. Now, I'm not saying that that doesn't happen in real life, because it probably does, but it didn't particularly feel well written or executed to me as a viewer in that regard. But credit where credit's due, Anthony Perkins is brilliant in his role as Norman Bates, and he does the best with what he has to work with, and without him, this movie would be considerably worse than it is. As part of an expansion of the Psycho mythology, it's definitely worth watching, and I'm sure when I watch Psycho 3 and 4, I might come back to this one in time with a different view on it, and if I've got any immediate thoughts, I'll definitely mention them when I review part 3. If you're asking me for a rating, I'd probably have to give this one 2.5 out of 5. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just average, and to be honest, for most sequels to horror movies, that's usually where a majority of them lie. I mean, some of them, they don't even make it that far, so in that sense, it's doing quite well. So, on that note, we move on to Psycho 3, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.